For as long as I can remember, my stuttering has been like an open invitation for people I knew to ridicule me. For a time, I thought if I could just find something else for them to focus on, they'd lay off on the stuttering. So I started wearing the weirdest clothes I could find. But none of that helped at all. Instead, it just added to the pile of insults that was being thrown my way. I wished people would just stop mocking me for something I couldn't control. That dark period in my life was when I found breakdancing. I'm Chris, and this is the story of how I got people to stop making fun of my speech impediment. When my mom tells stories about my toddler years, she always starts with how I didn't really speak until I was 5. I made noises and garbled sounds, but never words my family could understand. At first, they thought maybe I was hearing impaired, but they soon found out that wasn't the case when I showed signs that I could hear what they were saying. And then, they landed on the conclusion that I was probably mute. It wasn't until they took me to a series of pediatricians, audiologists, and speech pathologists that they found out that I was capable of speech. I just had a severe stutter. From then on, I began seeing Dr. Carlisle. She was an awesome doctor to have as a kid. Dr. Carlisle somehow always managed to make me feel comfortable, and I was never scared of going to the clinic. For a couple of years, we worked on improving my speech so I could improve my future quality of life, and we were getting there. Everyone was definitely seeing a massive improvement, but then my mom stopped taking me to Dr. Carlisle's clinic. Mom and Dad told me she had to move to some European country, but I later found out she died in a car accident. That Monday was my first day in first grade. It was already tough enough knowing that I could never again see the one person that made me comfortable enough to talk, but the way my mom said goodbye on the first day of school in front of the other kids just made sure that my time there would be a nightmare as well. Try not to stutter in front of your new friends, okay? She winked. I looked down in embarrassment and kicked at the floor with my new sneakers. I glanced left and right, knowing full well that the giggles and snickers were directed at me. Thanks, Mom, I said. I dumped my stuff on the nearest table I could find and kept to myself. And then, as soon as recess was rung, 3 tiny girls cornered me by the tree where I was peacefully eating my sandwich. Why don't you talk, loser? Said one of them. I looked up at them and then immediately looked down at my sandwich again. My friend was talking to you, said another, swiping at my hands and sending the BLT flying off into the sandpit. Go away, I finally said to them. Bella, Taryn, and Coral erupted with laughter, and I guess you would have too if you were there. Everybody does. That first month of primary school alone undid years of progress that I made with Dr. Carlisle. The stuttering got worse the more stressed I got, and I would go for days without uttering a word. Eventually, my parents just gave up trying, especially since, as my mom always reminded me, doctors are expensive. That was how it continued to be for years and years and years. My head down and only talked when I absolutely needed to. My mom would complain about me not being able to talk right, and I would slink away to find a place to be alone like the unwanted, damaged person that I was. It wasn't until high school that I really understood why Mom was like that to me. Why won't you just leave me alone? I said to Bella. She pushed me against the lockers, and hitting the steel bumps that were the combination locks was like getting punched by a bunch of unusually strong toddler hands. In case you were ever wondering, yeah, the Hobbit version of Mean Girls followed me all the way to high school. Because, well, I think it's fun, said Bella. She drew close to me. close enough for me to smell the scent of vanilla wafting from her neck, even though she ever only came up to my chest. I leaned down and closed my eyes. "Ew!" exclaimed Taryn and Coral. Bella laughed. "You thought I was going to kiss you? You?" Mortified, I ran out of the halls and into the quad where most of the students had just begun to pour into after the bell had rung. I wish they hadn't followed me, but against their better judgment, they did. Bella was all flustered, her cheeks red with color. "Gross, you perv!" she yelled for everyone to hear. "He tried to kiss me, perv!" No, she's lying, I said. "We were there, we saw it," said the two other members of Destiny's mini child. Bella started prodding my chest with her tiny fingers. "You think I could ever want a kiss from you? You can't even say your name right. Bet your mom doesn't even want you anymore. You pathetic excuse for a..." But before I knew it, people were trying to pull me away from her. And in the midst of the commotion, I heard my mom's voice. "What in the... Have you lost your mind now, too? Punching a girl!" My mom dragged me through the quad to the car park and into the car and started driving like a lunatic. "That principal of yours is going to call me in to apologize to that poor girl's parents. You know that, right? Do you know how much trouble you're putting me and your father in? You want to be the talk of the whole family again, huh? Is that it? Talking like an illiterate, not fun enough for you anymore? Now, you have to be the cousin who beats up girls, too. You have no idea how my family talks about me behind my back because of you. You ungrateful little prick! Black sheep of the family. And now, my son can't even talk without breaking his brain? You know how ashamed I am whenever we have to go to these awful reunions? I wish, sometimes you make me wish I never had you." That was when she started sobbing like crazy. On that intersection, as the stoplights flashed from yellow to red. On the day that I decided to punch a girl. So, as I sat there, stunned at hearing how my mom hated me and my stutter, I decided it was probably best if she got what she wanted. Quietly slipped out of my seatbelt and opened the car door. Before she even realized it, I was gone. I spent a few nights on the street before I got lucky and got a ride to a neighboring city. I washed cars, begged, and hitchhiked until I reached the state border. From there, I took a bus and ended up in the city. I would eventually call home. I found a shelter soon enough, but more importantly, I found my best friend there. The guy who volunteered on weekends. Kevin. Kevin was a star, and he knew it. On Saturday mornings, he'd go down to the park and dance for the tourists and the joggers who'd stop to watch. When he came to volunteer at the shelter, he'd always bring as much food as he could. He acted like he knew everyone by name, and every time he'd do a high five or a fist bump with anyone, it brought a smile to their faces. I think it was the way he treated people with kindness that drew me to him. How he listened to people like me who others would rather ignore and wish away. That really convinced me that I could talk to him. On Sundays, Kevin taught the kids at the shelter how to dance. I must have watched him do this a couple weeks before I finally plucked out the courage to approach him. As he saw me, he nodded in acknowledgement. "New here?" Yeah, I said. Kevin smiled. "No need to get so nervous. I'm just the volunteer." No. Not nervous. I have a stutter, I said. Kevin looked as if he just committed the greatest crime in the world. "Oh, shoot," he said. "Jeez, I'm sorry, man. I wasn't thinking. Like, I thought you were just really nervous or something." Well, I was. I laughed. "Just trust me. I've heard worse." I asked him why a kid my age was volunteering at a shelter, and he asked me why a kid his age was in the shelter. We exchanged stories, and when he heard mine, all he could say was, "Want to learn how to breakdance?" I said yes. And for months and months, we'd practiced on weekends. Because of Kevin, I found something that I could be good at where I didn't have to talk at all. For years, we stayed friends. He went to a nearby college, and I worked in as many small jobs as I could find. And when I eventually got to a point where I could afford my own place, Kev and I became roommates. He ended up dropping out of college, and I ended up quitting my 400th car wash job. Instead, we decided we were going to form our own dance crew. We trained day and night with our new members, until one day, Kevin decided to sign us up to audition for a talent competition on TV. It was a moonshot. A total and absolute dream. We all knew we had no chance, but we got in. And then somehow, we kept getting moved to the next rounds. So when we won the whole thing, let's just say we never doubted Kevin's gut ever again. We were famous and rich for a welcome change. That was how my mom found me again. She called me up one day, told me she saw me on TV. That was all she ever said on that call. That and that my father had died years ago. Our group broke up a couple of years later, but Kevin and I are still best friends. I made peace with my past and realized I could have done things better too. Instead of running away, I could have faced my problems head on. And I realized that as much as I resented people for judging me for something I couldn't control, I also mocked Bella, Taryn, and Coral for their height. I love dancing and telling stories with movement. But wouldn't it be nice if I could tell those same stories with my voice instead? And prove that I can make people laugh, despite my stutter, and not because of it?